Welcome to another tutorial, part of the Django blog series, where we're showing you how easy it is to basically create any blog that you want with a backend being Django. And so you can just go and find any HTML template of a blog, and with just a little bit of work, you can actually attach Django to the back of that and have yourself a fully working website. So that's the point of this tutorial series. And in the last one, we showed how we were able to render this page out, which had a little bit of logic in showing our first 3 posts and the last 3 posts from the blog, as well as some logic in showing a form to subscribe to a newsletter. And so we're going to continue from that in this one, where we're going to now show how we can build this blog kind of list view of all the posts that we have created. And with this little nice looking sidebar where we can search, we get a little bit of a query set with the latest posts, our current categories and the number of articles that are in those categories, and then some tags and a little bit of other logic such as pagination and stuff like that. So we're going to run through that in this video, and if you'd like to follow along, you can just go to our Dream blog GitHub repository, and then you can go to the commits, and if you'd like to follow along, you can just pull and reset back to this last commit, which is the homepage renders with Django. And once you've got that running and you've got everything sorted in your editor, then let's get started. So let's get started with opening up our templates directory, and we're going to go into the blog.html file, which is what's rendering out this blog list view. And we're going to need the view which actually renders that. So if we go to our posts views, then here we have the index view, which is what we did in the last one, and we can actually get rid of that print statement. And we've got the blog view here, which is what's rendering out blog.html. So we're going to be working out of this view at the moment, and let's just take a look at what we actually need to display. So working from top to bottom, we've got 2 sections, one which is kind of like the actual content and one which is the sidebar. So in this left hand side of the content, you've got the list of posts, which is showing the thumbnail, the date it was actually posted, one of the categories related to it, the title, a little bit of a preview or description as to what that post might be, and then you've got the author, the author's name, and it says it was 2 months ago that it was posted. So maybe this isn't actually the time that it was posted. Maybe this is actually today's date. And then you've got the number of comments. And that kind of template is then rendered over and over because we can see it's the exact same thing 4 times. And so we only need the code for one of these instances. So we can just loop through our query set and render out the same logic every single time. So that's mainly what's going on here in the content. The only other thing is that we have some kind of pagination going on where we can click 2 and it takes us, or supposedly is supposed to take us to page 2 and then page 3. And these posts are meant to update with the content that's in the query set. So we're going to take a look at how to do that. Then in the sidebar, you've got some kind of search, which we've also got in the nav bar. Then we've got the latest posts, which we actually saw how to do in the last video. And then we've got a categories list, which is showing the number of articles that have currently been created that linked to this kind of category. And then you've got some tags, which we're also seeing being linked in the actual post itself. So perhaps a tag and a category are different things, and you can link your article to those different types of models. So what we're going to do is we're going to get started with taking a look at the HTML, seeing what we can actually cut out and only loop through to display that and just help us reduce the amount of code that we need to actually write. And then we're going to take a look at the view itself and what data we need to pass through into it so that we can actually render it in the HTML. So we've got both of those files open, and if we go into blog.html, then here we have the latest posts, and we can see we've got the main, which has this column large 8, and that we can assume is actually the entire container because we can see it's not taking up the entire width of the screen. So inside there, you're then getting a post, which is with a column of 6, and we can see that that's being repeated and repeated and repeated, and then it shows pagination there, and then the column large 4 is in an aside. So the main is holding everything that's in this main piece of content, and then the aside is what's holding that kind of sidebar. So let's get started with just closing those post tags there, so we can just see all of them right next to each other. So now you can see all 4 of them there, and we only need 1 of them. So I'm just going to delete those 3. And there we have our 1. And what we want to do is actually just loop through inside this row and create all of these posts. So we could just say for article in article list, and then we have our div, and then at the end of that we would say end for. And if we take a look at the view, we would then need to pass in the article list, which we could actually call post since we're dealing with a post app name. So we can say for post in post list, and then here we just need to say that the post list equals to post.objects.all, which we should have imported at the top. Then we can go ahead and create some context, and we'll call the post list that we just created now, and then just pass in that context inside our render method. Cool, so let's go back into the blog, and now we just need to fill in the actual data relevant to each post. So the date meta last, we're not too sure what's actually going to go there. We could put today's date, so that's one thing. So we'll just leave that for now. Then you've actually got the category, so we could just remove that, and this will be post.categories.all. And we're actually going to need to make sure that we can render out all of them there. So what we'll actually do is just come in there and we'll loop through it. So we'll say for cat in post.categories.all, then we'll come to the end of that and say end for, and in there we'll just say cat like that. Then we have the h3, which weirdly has a class of h4, and that will just say post.title. And then we have a paragraph, which would be like the post description or overview. So if we want to take a look at that in the model, we have an overview there. So this will be overview. Then you've got the footer, which we can see doesn't have anything yet. We've got some a tag there, which is wrapping around. Let's actually put it like this. We've got a div there, and the a tag ends over there. So this anchor tag is actually wrapping around the avatar itself, with this title being the author's name. So this is going to be post.author.username, and we can see this if we go into our models. We have the author, which is a foreign key on the author here, and we can just say .user, and actually that's going to be author.user.username, like that. And if we take a look, we also have profile picture. So here, instead of having a static image, we can remove that, and this will also reference off the post. So we can say post.author and then just grab that .profile picture.url, and that will reference the actual static URL to the author's profile picture. Then we have this 2 months ago, which we can change to post.timestamp. And we can put in a filter as well and say time since, and then say ago after that. So that'll render out something like 2 days ago or whatever we want. And then we'll just replace 12 with post.comment count. Cool. So let's refresh the page here. And now we've got at least our own 3 posts that are coming through here. So we've got the categories of each of them. We've got the profile picture, the admin as username, the time it was created, the number of comments, and etc. So now we just need to change this image to be the actual post image. So let's just go here and remove the static to be post.thumbnail.url, and we can see that here off of the post. So now if we come back and refresh it, there we go. Now we have most of the data coming through. And what I'm actually going to do is just remove that 20 May there, because we're not too sure what it's actually being used for. So we'll just remove that. And we'll worry about the alignment of these things towards the end of the tutorial series. But for now, we're just going to make sure that we get this to actually work. And so now we just need to get our pagination working. So what we'll do is make use of Django's paginator, which is part of its core module. And so we're going to take a look at that now. So let's go back into the view, and here at the top we're going to import from Django.core. So let's go to the top, from Django.core.paginator, import the paginator, and we're going to need the empty page, and we're going to need the page not an integer, like that. And this is really all we need to actually paginate our query sets. So let's go back down here to the blog, and what we need to do is we need to pass in our query set, which in this case is the post list, into our paginator. So let's say the paginator equals to paginator, and then we pass in the post list. And then the next thing is the per page, which is the number of instances of our query set that we want to render per page. So we're going to say 1, just as an example, so that we can actually demonstrate the paginator. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to create what's called a page request variable. So what's going to happen is in our URL, there's going to be a parameter passed in, which is going to be page. So it's going to look like $page equals to, and this could be page 1, page 2, page 3, and depending on whatever page you're on, the paginator that Django has is going to determine what instances in the query set need to be rendered. So how this would look if we wanted to actually get this page request variable is we would say request.get a value from the get request, which would be page. So if we had $page equals 3, then in this case page would equal 3. And then what we need to do is just a bunch of conditions to check for these exceptions, such as the empty page and page is not an integer. So that means that maybe you said page is equal to some kind of string or something like this, then that would be incorrect and it wouldn't actually render correctly. And then the other thing is that if the page is returning an empty page, then it needs to do something as well. So we're going to create a try and except block here. So we're going to say try the paginated query set equal to paginator dot page, and then we just pass in the number, and in this case this would be the page request variable. So this would be 1, 2, 3, etc., and the paginated query set would then be the corresponding instances from the query set that need to be rendered out. So we're going to try and do that, and then we're going to say except, and we're going to listen for a specific exception, which is the page not an integer. So if that happens, then we're just going to grab the first page. So we're going to say paginated query set equals to paginator dot page of 1, like that. So that means just go to the first page. And then the second exception, we're going to listen for empty page. So if there's an empty page, then again we're going to create the paginated query set, and we're going to say paginator dot page, but in this case we're going to call in paginator dot num pages. And what that's basically returning is the actual number of pages in the query set. So if we have, let's say, 100 posts that we want to render, and we say we only want 4 per page, then that means there's 25 pages. So in this instance, if it's an empty page, then we want to return the 25th page. That's what it's saying. So now that we've covered those two, now all we need to do is just pass in this page request variable into our context so that we can actually get it from the get request. And actually what we're going to do is cut that out, and we're going to store it in a variable. So we're going to call this the page request variable and store it like that. And then we'll say request.get the page request variable. That's what's getting either 1, 2, or 3. And then we need to pass that into the context as well, because you're going to see how we're going to handle that with the pagination in a second. And then we also need to pass in what's now the paginated query set. So we're going to need to take that, and so instead of rendering out the post list, which is just all the posts, now we're going to render out the paginated post list, which is the paginated query set. So we've handled this in the view. Now we just need to handle this in the blog.html file, and this is going to be here in this pagination section. And so here what we want to do is we want to actually make use of some properties on the query set, because now that we're using the paginator, this actually gives us access to a few properties on the pagination that we can make use of here in the HTML. So if we take a look at what this looks like, we've got an arrow there and an arrow there. And what we want to do is make use of those two first. So basically, this arrow on the left means go to the previous post, whereas the arrow on the right means go to the next post. But we only want to render those if we have a previous post and if we have a next post. So that is this first list item and this last list item, because you can see this has a font awesome of angle left and then angle right. So those are the two arrows. So here inside the href, this needs to take us to the page that we're on, but we need to add the request parameter, which is page, and then say that that equals to, let's say, 1 or 2 or 3, which actually has to be the previous page number. We can't just say it's equal to a static value. It has to be equal to a dynamic value, because that value is going to change depending on where we are in the pagination. So here we're going to make use of the question mark, and we're going to say question mark page equals to, and then this would be, for example, 4, right? That's what we need to pass in there. But we've actually stored this in the page request variable, so we're going to make use of that, and we're going to say like this inside the curly braces, and then say equals to, but not 4. Remember, this has to be a dynamic value, so this is going to be inside quotations, inside curly braces again, and like I said, we're going to make use of properties off of the pagination, which is the query set. So this is going to be paginated query set dot, and we can actually make use of the previous page number. So that's going to take us to the previous page, but it's going to be equal to, for example, if we're on page 2, then previous page number would be 1. So that's going to take us to the previous page. And now that you've seen that, you can probably think about what it would look like for the opposite. So if we just paste all that there, this is going to be equal to next page number. But the key is that we can't just render that out. What if we don't have a next page? Remember, because then we're going to land up with the empty page error. So what we need to do is wrap these with some conditions. So this is going to be an if statement. So we'll say if query set dot has next, that's another property. Then we'll say end if. So if there is no next page, then we won't see that arrow. And then the same sort of thing for the first one, but it's not going to be has next, it's going to be has previous. And then we just say end if as well. So let's take a look at this now. And just go to the right page. And cool, so we're on page 1, and we're not seeing the arrows come through, and that's because we've actually used the wrong context variable. We're meant to be using post list, which actually I'm going to change to be query set, because it's actually just a little bit more intuitive. So we're going to say query set that has previous, and that in there, and then we're going to change paginated query set to the same thing, so query set. And now let's take a look at this and refresh there, and then you've got 1. You don't have the left arrow because there is no post behind 1. This is the first page. So if we click next, then we're on page 2, and you can see the arrows there on the left, and page 3, and we can go back, and you can see that the arrows are updating depending on what page we're on. Cool, so this seems to be working, but we're not seeing the post come through, and that's again because we've changed this context variable from post list to query set. So we just need to come up top here and make this query set, and now let's refresh this. There we go. So now if I click the arrow, there's the second post and there's the third post, and we can keep going between these, and it seems to be working. And we can test out if we have a wrong page. Then you can see that it just took us to the first one, and if we said, let's say page equals 4, then it took us to the last one. So all of that is working, but now let's talk about this number 2 and number 3. We could make the highlighted number the number of the page that we're on currently, and then we could have 2 next to it being if they are any next to it, or we could make it that it shows 2 to the left and 2 to the right. There's plenty of ways on doing this, so I'm not going to get too complicated into this because I think it's up to you on how you want to actually make this displayed. So what I'm going to do is just show the current page number so that they have an idea of where they are, and they can either click left or right. They can't jump 10 pages ahead, but that's just for the purpose of this tutorial. So we'll just go here, and down in the pagination I'm going to get rid of 2 of these links, and this is active, hence why it has the circle in gray. And this is going to be query set, and this is just .number. So that's the actual page number that we have right now. So if we refresh this, now you can see it says 3 there. And if we go back, it says 2, 1, etc. So I'm just going to keep it like that. And we're not going to make it only show 1 post. We're going to go back and change this to be 4. So we'll just change like this. And now if we come back, now you can see we're only on page 1 and there are no arrows because we only have 3 posts right now. But at least you can understand that the pagination is actually working. Cool. So we've got all of that. Now we can move to the sidebar, and I'm going to start first with the latest posts. We'll leave the search for last. So we can just go back, and I'm going to close models. And if we just scroll down, then here we have the search. There we have latest posts, and we can see we have the items being the same code written over and over. So I'm going to get rid of 2 of them again, and now we only have 1 of them. So I'm just going to come and loop through again, and we'll say for post in most recent, let's say we'll call it that, and then go to the end and say end if, and then we just go to the views, and we need to pass in the most recent as something into the context. So we'll say most recent, which is most recent, and then we'll just grab that, and we'll come to the top and say most recent equals post.objects.order by, and we need to say .order by negative timestamp so that they're in the reverse order, and then get only the first 3. So we say :3, which means it'll only get the first 3 items. So now we have those, and we can then actually just render the information out here. So we're going to get rid of the static URL, and this will be post.thumbnail.url, and then this is the title, so we'll say post.title, and then we have a view count and a comment count. So right now we don't have a view count on the model, so I'm just going to copy that and just make it view count, which also has a default as 0, and then we'll come here and change 500 to be post.viewCount, and then this will be post.commentCount. Then here we have an anchor tag, which is not actually meant for that post, so we'll get rid of that, and I'm actually just going to bring it into the right place so we have it looking correct, and we can actually just tab it like that. Then here we will change this to be a URL. So we can do this in 2 ways. We can either create something on the model and make it something like a get absolute URL, or we could just hard code it, but I'm going to actually go the get absolute URL method. So here we'll just say post.getAbsoluteURL, just like that, and I'm actually going to copy that and go all the way to the top here where we have the post from the beginning, and this is not post.html, this is also post.getAbsoluteURL, and over there as well. And then we can scroll down and we can actually add the href here as well. We can just copy that one in the pagination just to finish that off. So that'll be page request variable equals to query set dot number, so it just takes us to the same place, and there we go. Cool. So let's just come back down, and now we need to actually create this method. So we'll say define get absolute URL, and it's going to take in self, and then we're going to need reverse, which is a specific method from URLs. So we'll say from Django.urls import reverse, and then we'll come down here and say return a reverse, and here we pass in the view name, which is basically what we do in our URLs. So let's just go to blog URLs, and here we would give names to our views. So right now we have blog, which is just the blog list. So here we could just say name, which is equal to, let's say, post list, and then here we could copy that and paste this, and this would be post detail, and we can then add in something like an ID. And I know people don't like when we use URLs as an ID and not a slug. But again, this is just as a tutorial. You can of course use a slug, and we'll add that in later. So then we can just take that into our post view just to set that up and say ID is there, and it actually won't matter from there on because we're not going to do anything specific yet. It's just so that it takes in that parameter. And so there we have that, and we can say reverse of post detail, and then just pass in the keyword arguments as a dictionary where the ID is self.id. So that will be the get absolute URL. We can close that, and we can close URLs as well, and all of that should be working. So let's take a look and refresh this, and it says we have an unexpected end if, which is in our page here. So let's go and see. This is meant to be end 4. Cool. So refresh that. Now we have a view count as no such column, and that's correct because we don't actually have a view count. So we'll just close that and say python manage.py make migrations, and we've set a default to 0, so we can make that migration. And then we can say migrate, and then run the server, come back, refresh. There we go. So now you can see each post has 0 views, which is correct. They don't have any views, and there's the comment count, and there's the thumbnail. And if we click on it, in this instance, it takes us to post/3, which is the ID of that post, but we're getting that generic post coming through, which is fine. If we click the second one, then it takes us to post/2, but again, it's the generic one. So that's all working now. Now we can actually get the categories sorted as well. So let's just come back in. We'll close the terminal there. And this is going to require a little bit of some querying to actually get the count for each category. So let's take a look at the model and see how we're doing that. So we have a category model, which is right here. And so what I'm going to do is just create a view here at the top, which will be like our category count view, something like that. So we can say category count, and we'll say that this takes in no parameters. And so the first thing we need to do is actually get all of the post objects. And what we're going to do is take all the post objects, we're going to grab the category names from them, and then count the number of times each category occurred, so that we have a query set of each category and how many posts had that category as its selected category. So what we're going to do is just say this is, let's say this is the query set, and we'll say it equals to post.objects.values, and we're going to get the categories like this. So we have .values, and that's going to return only the categories field of each post. So we're not asking for all the information of each post, we're just asking specifically for its categories. And then we're going to say .annotate, and this is basically just going to return a dictionary where each key is just going to be each category, and we can assign another property which will be a count. So that'll be the count of the number of posts that have that category as its category. So what we can do is say the count, and we're going to need to import count, which comes from Django db.models. So db.models import count, and we are counting categories. And we can actually write this a little bit nicer, just like this. And then we can just come here and say return query set. So then we can take the category count and we can bring this into our blog, and we'll come to the top and say that this is the category count, and we'll call the method actually get category count, and do it like this, and then pass in category count like this. And what I'm going to do is actually print out that query set when we get it. So I'll say print category count, and I'll bring up the terminal like that. So let's refresh this, and it says okay, cool, that's just a syntax error. So get category count, cool, refresh that, and let's take a look here. So now you can see we get categories 1, categories count 3, then categories 2, and etc, etc. But the 2 and the 1, that's not really that clear as to what that is. So instead of rendering that ID, because that's what it really is, we can come here and say categories name. I believe that's its title rather. Okay, so categories _ title, which will get the field title of that categories object. And then we can just try that again. So refresh, come back, and here you can see that we get the categories title, which is business, and then the categories title count is 1. Then Django got 3, e-commerce got 1, social media got 1. And let's actually go into the admin and see if that's actually true. So we'll just log in and let's go to categories, and you can see we have social media, e-commerce, business, Django. So let's go down, let's go to posts. We have, this is the first post which has Django and business, so that's 1 and 1. Then we have Django and e-commerce, so that's 2 Django, 1 business, 1 e-commerce. And then we have 3 Django, 1 business, 1 e-commerce, and 1 social media. And that's exactly what this is returning to us. And that's 100% correct. That's what we wanted. So now we're getting this dictionary, which is actually a query set. And that's really cool because now we can loop through that query set in our blog.html and use those attributes in the dictionary, those keys, as how we will reference those values. So let's just go down. We can remove the print statement there, and I'm going to close models. So now here we have categories, and we can say for cat in, and this is going to be the category count. So category count like this, and then we will end the for loop over here. So end for, then we can remove 4 of those items because we only need 1, so we can loop through it. And I'm just going to make it look better like this. Then this is going to be cat dot, and if we remember from this dictionary, this is the categories title. So we can't say cat dot title, we have to say cat dot categories title, because that's unfortunately how we've specified the values here. So that's what we render out there, and then the 12 would be cat dot, then this would be categories title underscore count, like that. Cool. So let's take a look at what that looks like. Come back in here, refresh this, and now we have business is 1, Django is 3, etc., etc. And that's quite cool. And then we have the tags, and this is actually kind of the same thing as the categories. And so for the sake of the video, I'm not going to run through creating tags as well as categories, because I think it's pretty much the same thing, and I think I would remove these. So let's just head back to the search, and we'll run through how we can actually search through items. So basically what we need to do is just take whatever this person is inputting. So this could be some kind of phrase that they're typing in, and basically just try and match that to whatever kind of text we have in our models. And in this case, we have the title and we have the overview of those posts, which we could try and match to whatever the user is searching. And that's just a basic way of searching. You could also search in a variety of ways, by the category or by the user, etc. But we're going to focus on searching based on text, and in a really basic way, which just returns results that match that text. So what I'm going to do is create a separate HTML file which will render the results, and that will be a list of posts that match the term that you searched for. So when you search in here, it's going to take you to another page which will show you results. So what we'll do is create a template here and call this search results.html, and then we can close the server there. And I'm actually just going to copy the top part there, and then we'll just end the block, and then this will be the search results. So here in the views, we'll just create another view, and we'll just say define search and say it takes in a request. And so what we need to do is we need to get the request variable, which will be whatever we decide. Basically, we could say something like $Q equals to, and this could be Django, for example. Then Q would be our request variable. We want to get the value of Q, and then that would be Django, and then match that to text. So what we need to do is say the query equals to request.get.getQ as an example. And then we'll say if there's a query, then we're going to perform some logic in searching our posts and seeing whether our posts have any titles that contain that query or any overviews that contain the query. But we can use a special model from Django, which is Q. And this is coming from the same place where we imported count, which is Q, just Q, like that. And what we're going to do is first grab hold of all of the post objects that we have. So we're going to say this is the post list, and we'll say that this is post.objects.all. And then we're going to say if there's a query, then we're going to say post list equals to, and we could actually call this query set. So we'll say query set equals to query set, so the current query set that we have, and we're going to filter the current query set that we have. So we're going to say dot filter, and in this filter we're going to filter by two things, and this is what the Q model allows us to do. So we just call Q, and you can see it says encapsulates filters as objects so that they can be combined logically. So it says using either and or this or symbol, which is like a piping operator. So we can say, for example, title double underscore, and we can use a bunch of different methods of filtering, which could be such as I contains or is equal to or is greater than, less than. So there are lots of different ways, and we're going to specifically use the .I contains method. So basically we're saying, does the title contain the query? So we say equals to query. And then we're going to do the same thing for the overview. So we say overview double underscore I contains query. But we need to use the piping operator here, and that's so that we can say, does the query set have a title that contains it, or does it have an overview that contains it? And this could be happening at the same time. There could be an occurrence where the title has the word and the overview has it at the same time, and they might belong to the exact same post. And so at the end of this, to avoid getting the same post twice, what we need to do is say .distinct. So what that's going to do is check, is the result from these two queries the same, or does it contain results that are the same object? And if it does, then just call .distinct on that so that we get only one of each type of object in the query set. And so now that we've actually got the query set, we can then return that. So we'll say context equals to a dictionary, and we'll say query set is query set, just like that. And then we'll just say return a render of the request, and this will be search results.html. And then we pass in the context, just like that. So now we can take the search view, and let's go into our blog URLs. We'll import it there, and then we'll just make another path here, and this could be for something like search, and then pass in search and say name equals search as well, just like that. Cool. So now in our blog.html, we can go back to our search bar, which is here. The action we're going to say is going to go to a URL, and this will be search. The input is of type search at the moment, and we're going to make this equal to text and say this is what are you looking for. This button is of type submit, so everything seems fine. And then we just need to give our input a name. So we'll say name equals to, and this needs to be the query variable, which is this Q. So we say name equals Q. Come back here, refresh the page, and let's search example first. And if I click, then we get question mark Q equals first. And this is now rendering out the search results page. So we need to loop through our results. So say for result in query set, let's say, then we'll just end the for loop there. Then here we can say an A tag, for example, and this will then be the result dot title. And we can also add an H2 then say this is the results of your search. And then we'll add an href there and say this is result.get absolute URL. And we might actually just want to say post. Maybe that's a better word. So post.title, post.get absolute URL. Cool. Let's come back here, refresh this. This is the results of your search. And then you can see this is the first post. And if you click on that, that's going to take you to posts 1. And the reason for that is because first is in the title of this actual post. This is the first post. And we can go back. Let's actually go back to this page here and we'll search for overview. And now you get this is the first post, this is the second post, this is the third post, because they each have the same description that has the word overview in it. So that's why we're getting those results. And we might want to maybe add a break statement, and we could style this and make this better, but all we're doing is just showing the results that actually come from that search. And so if we go back to blog, now we've handled the actual search. We've got the latest posts, the categories, and we've got a paginated query set here, which is also working. So all in all, we've managed to get this whole page working with Django in this video, and we've got a pretty cool outcome. It's looking really good at the moment, and we'll continue with this in the next one. So if you've enjoyed this video, leave a comment down below and let us know what you've thought. And otherwise, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.